critics. Isn't it a joke?" Adam Wayne looked down like a boy, and answered in a constrained voice, "I do not understand your Majesty. I cannot believe that while I fight for your royal charter, your Majesty deserts me for these dogs of the gold hunt." "Oh, damn yer, but what's this? What the devil's this?" The King stared into the young Provost's face, and in the twilight of the rooms began to see that his face was quite white and his lips shaking. "What in God's name is the matter?" cried Auberon, holding his wrist. Wayne flung back his face, and the tears were shining on it. "I am only a boy," he said, "but it is true. I would paint the Red Lion on my shield if I had only my blood." King Auberon dropped the hand and stood without stirring, thunderstruck. "My God in heaven," he said, "is it possible that there is within the four seas of Britain a man who takes Notting Hill seriously?" "And my God in heaven," said Wayne passionately, "is it possible that there is within the four seas of Britain a man who does not take it seriously?" The King said nothing, but merely went back up the steps of the daïs like a man dazed. He fell back in his chair again and kicked his heels. "If this sort of thing is to go on," he said weakly, "I shall begin to doubt the superiority of art to life. In heaven's name, do not play with me. Do you really mean that you are, God help me, a Notting Hill patriot, that you are—" Wayne made a violent gesture, and the King soothed him wildly. All right, I see you are, but let me take it in. Do you really propose to fight these modern improvers with their boards and inspectors and surveyors and all the rest of it?" "Are they so terrible?" asked Wayne scornfully. The King continued to stare at him as if he were a human curiosity. "And I suppose," he said, "that you think that the dentists and small tradesmen and maiden ladies who inhabit Notting Hill will rally with war hymns to your standard?" "If they have blood, they will," said the Provost. "And I suppose," said the King, with his head back among the cushions, "that it never crossed your mind that—" his voice seemed to lose itself luxuriantly. "Never crossed your mind that any one ever thought that the idea of Notting Hill idealism was slightly ridiculous?" "Of course they think so," said Wayne. "What was the meaning of mocking the prophets?" "Where," asked the King, leaning forward, "where in heaven's name did you get this miraculously insane idea?" "You have been my tutor, sire," said the Provost, "in all that is high and honourable." "Huh?" said the King. "It was your Majesty who first stirred my dim patriotism into flame, 10 years ago, when I was a boy. I am only 19. I was playing on the slope of Pump Street with a wooden sword and a paper helmet, dreaming of great wars in an angry trance. I struck out with my sword and stood petrified, for I saw that I had struck you, sire, my King, as you wandered in noble secrecy, watching over your people's welfare. But I need have had no fear. Then I was taught to understand kingliness. You neither shrank nor frowned. You summoned no guards. You invoked no punishments. But in august and burning words, which are written in my soul, never to be erased, you told me to turn my sword against the enemies of my inviolate city. Like a priest pointing to the altar, you pointed to the hill of Notting. So long, you said, as you are ready to die for the sacred mountain, even if it were ringed with all the armies of Bayswater. I have not forgotten the words, and I have reason now to remember them, for the hour is come, and the crown of your prophecy. The sacred hill is ringed with the armies of Bayswater, and I am ready to die." The King was lying back in his chair, a kind of wreck. "Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord," he murmured, "what a life, what a life! All my work. I seem to have done it all. So you're the red-haired boy that hit me in the waistcoat. What have I done? God, what have I done? I thought I would have a joke. I have created a passion. I tried to compose a burlesque, and it seems to be turning half-way through into an epic. What is to be done with such a world? In the Lord's name, wasn't the joke broad and bold enough? I abandoned my subtle humour to amuse you, and I seem to have brought tears to your eyes. What's to be done with people when you write a pantomime for them, call the sausages classic festoons and the policeman cut in two a tragedy of public duty. But why am I talking? Why am I asking questions of a nice young gentleman who is totally mad? What is the good of it? What is the good of anything? O Lord, O Lord!" Suddenly he pulled himself upright. "Don't you really think the sacred Notting Hill at all absurd?" "Absurd?" asked Wayne blankly. "Why should I?" The King stared back equally blank. "I beg your pardon," he said. "Notting Hill," said the Provost simply, "is a rise or high ground of the common earth on which men have built houses to live, in which they are born, fall in love, pray, marry, and die. Why should I think it absurd?" The King smiled. "Because, my Leonidas," he began, then suddenly he knew not how, found his mind was a total blank. After all, why was it absurd? Why was it absurd? He felt as if the floor of his mind had given way. He felt as all men feel when their first principles are hit hard with a question. Barker always felt so when the King said, "Why trouble about politics?" The King's thoughts were in a kind of rout. He could not collect them. "It is generally felt to be a little funny," he said vaguely. "I suppose," said Adam, turning on him with a fierce suddenness, "I suppose you fancy crucifixion was a serious affair?" I began Auberon. "I admit I have generally thought it had its graver side." "Then you are wrong," said Wayne, with incredible violence. "Crucifixion is comic. It is exquisitely diverting. It was an absurd and obscene kind of impaling, reserved for people who were made to be laughed at, for slaves and provincials, for dentists and small tradesmen, as you would say. I have seen the grotesque gallows shape which the little Roman gutter boys scribbled on walls, as a vulgar joke blazing on the pinnacles of the temples of the world. And shall I turn back?" The King made no answer. Adam went on, his voice ringing in the roof. "This laughter, which men tyrannize, is not the great power you think it. Peter was crucified, and crucified head downwards. What could be funnier than the idea of a respectable old apostle upside down? What could be more in the style of your modern humour? But what was the good of it? Upside down or right side up, Peter was Peter to mankind. Upside down, he still hangs over Europe, and millions move and breathe only in the life of his Church." King Auberon got up absently. "There's something in what you say," he said. "You seem to have been thinking, young man." "Only feeling, sire," answered the Provost. "I was born, like other men, in a spot of the earth which I loved because I had played boys' games there, and fallen in love, and talked with my friends through the nights that were nights of the gods. And I feel the riddle. These little gardens where we told our loves, these streets where we brought out our dead, why should they be commonplace? Why should they be absurd? Why should it be grotesque to say that a pillar box is poetic, when for a year I could not see a red pillar box against the yellow evening in a certain street, without being racked with something of which God keeps the secret, but which is stronger than the sorrow of joy? Why should any one be able to raise a laugh by saying, 'The cause of Notting Hill'? Notting Hill, where thousands of immortal spirits blaze with alternate hope and fear." Auberon was flicking dust off his sleeve with quite a new seriousness on his face, distinct from the owlish solemnity which was the pose of his humour. "It is very difficult," he said at last. "It is a damned difficult thing. I see what you mean. I agree with you, even up to a point. Or I should like to agree with you, if I were young enough to be a prophet and poet. I feel a truth in everything you say until you come to the words Notting Hill. And then I regret to say that the old Adam awakes roaring with laughter, and makes short work of the new Adam, whose name is Wayne." For the first time Provost Wayne was silent, and stood gazing dreamily at the floor. Evening was closing in, and the room had grown darker. "I know," he said in a strange, almost sleepy voice, There is truth in what you say.